Isabelle.
And I'm Ben.
Welcome to Conversations in Company, a podcast from the charity Suicide&Co, here to make the suicide loss a little less lonely.
We've both been on this journey for a few years.
I lost my cousin to suicide in 2017.
And I lost my brother to suicide in 2018.
We really hope that we and our guests can offer you some companionship wherever you are on this journey.
Hi, Isabelle.
Hi. Good morning.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. Yeah.
We've recorded a few of these in close sequence, which is nice actually, because I love these conversations. They're so nice to have, and I guess we're sort of, I don't know when these episodes are going out, but we've sort of running to the end of recording season 2, and I guess it's so nice to reflect and go. I just love the fact that we're talking about these things and creating something that does talk about so much of the stuff that I really didn't know when I was going through my grief.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't quite believe it's
really nice.
End of second season.
I know. It's crazy, isn't it? But it's really nice to be able to put something out there that's so beneficial. And we've got another episode now where we're going to be talking about a really important topic, and one that I have so much experience with, which is the sort of forced journey into educating yourself on mental health and suicide, and sort of adapting to, I guess you could refer to it as like your new life. A lot of people sort of look at suicide and put their life into two chapters, don't they? Like the sort of chapter of their life before a suicide happens, and then the sort of chapter afterwards. And there's a huge amount of adaptation that you have to go through in that second chapter, and a lot of learning, and that can be quite challenging and difficult. So we're gonna chat about that. Is it something that you've struggled with and faced, that sort of transition and that forced education journey?
Definitely the transition and the education journey. I think I've not gone as far into campaigning as you have. Like it's my job, or it's been my job a little bit, but not in the same way that like I have to keep stats and figures in my head and like keep campaigning and stuff daily. But yeah, the knowledge of it, and I think also that the change that you feel in yourself when you know the stats, and when you're aware of like the personal like effect of that, you know.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, one of the first things I learned, because I was at school when Sam died. One of the first things I learned was just how many other people were feeling the same, and that was my first introduction to the world of mental health and suicide. Was just suddenly realizing, wow, this is everywhere, and I sort of reacted to that with quite a lot of fear. Of I don't want to do this again, because what's the phrase? If you're a hammer, all you see is nails. Like because this has happened to me. Suddenly, everyone was talking about suicide, and suddenly I was going, "Oh, this is going to happen again and again and again," and I just didn't want to do that. That was really challenging, actually. And the more you learn, and we're going to be talking about loads of different things that you learn as part of this journey, and some of them can be really beneficial, but other things can actually be quite scary and really challenging.
Was Sam the first person? Sorry, was Sam the first person you knew who died by suicide?
Oh yeah, I didn't even know it was a thing that happened. So I didn't, when Sam was diagnosed with depression, that was the first time I'd ever heard the word depression. When Sam died from suicide, that was the first time I ever realized that suicide happened to people in sort of my bubble. Like suicide was something that happened elsewhere around the world, not in my life. So yeah, I went from essentially zero knowledge about any of this to, unfortunately, quite a lot of knowledge a year later. And then obviously working, this is my full-time job now, is working in mental health and suicide. Although I'd love to say I have all the stats in my head, but I don't. I have to write them down.
You sound
I've
like
got
you
a
do.
terrible memory. No, I really don't. But it is a massive adaptation to sort of understand what happens. And there's this real challenge between trying to work out why something happened because you want to feel settled and closure from that, but then also finding out what happened and then starting to feel really guilty about stuff. And I know I really struggled with sort of reflecting back on what happened, and sort of that sort of fed a lot of the guilt and shame that I was feeling, which
Yeah.
can be really challenging as well.
Yeah.
We've also got a guest.
Yeah.
We've got an amazing guest actually, and we've been chatting before we start recording about her all of her amazing knitting advice, and she is just a brilliant person, doing some amazing work around mental health. Um, we've got Jane George joining us. Hi, Jane.
Hi Ben. Hi Isabelle.
You
Hi.
mentioned earlier that you're joining us from a lovely sunny day in Wales near the beach, and I'm very jealous in
Oh
a
yeah,
hot flat in
just
London.
outside, just outside Tenby.
Oh,
Just to
stunning.
make you feel even better, we've got beaches all around us and lots of happy people because they're all on holiday. So that's good. Never
Oh, what a
met an
lovely place
unhappy
to be.
person on holiday.
I'll tell you what, I'm in Edinburgh and it's been so cold. My family and my boyfriend came up this week, and I think it's been 34 degrees in London this week. And honestly, it's like 17,
Uh,
18 in the day, and then it drops to maybe under 10 at night.
oh my
Yeah.
God. But
Wow.
Edinburgh is a beautiful city, so you've got that going
Yes,
for you. So
it
it's
is.
one of the nicest cities in the UK,
Yes,
Edinburgh.
it's very beautiful. Yeah.
Had had you been to Edinburgh before you
Fringe.
started doing Fringe?
I mean, I first came to the Fringe in 2007 because I'm much older than everyone I know. I came to the Fringe in 2007. That was my first time in Edinburgh. And then I've come maybe 10 times since then. And I've been to Edinburgh once outside of August, but that also was to do a gig.
Right.
So I've never like come here just for like a weekend.
Yeah, so
But
I
when you're
still need to do that.
Yeah, the Fringe, because it completely takes over like the central part of Edinburgh, and there's just like posters everywhere and people. It's really rammed. So I remember like coming out of Waverley to do a gig in like July 2019 and being like, "Wow, this is a quiet city. Hello, look at this architecture." Because normally you're just like, right, posters, person. Like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, amazing. So that's two places I've got to visit then on my list:
yeah.
Edinburgh Fringe and the beaches of Tenby. Both of which I need to feel like I need to be there soon. As both places I really love to go. Jane, would you mind just sort of talking us through your relationship with suicide, and what that journey looked like for you briefly, and what are you doing now, and just talk to people about the work you've done since.
So, in the crazy time of COVID, when the world felt probably as unsafe as it has done since, I don't know, the world wars or whatever, it was pretty grim, wasn't it?
Mm.
And everyone was in lockdown. We lost our 19-year-old son, Claire, on the 23rd of July 2020. And up until that point, rather like you've just said, Ben, um, suicide was something that happened to everybody else. And that very much was in my mindset. I used to look at my family and say, oh, I'm really lucky. I've got this lovely little family which are safe and happy and all of this. And it's just such a shock to realise that underneath that, it wasn't, and that was his solution to where he was at that time. It was a very visual occurrence because of our eldest son, Dr. Alex. So it wasn't a case. It wasn't a case of. So you get it would be on the news and
Mm.
stuff like that. So it was very very visual, and that kind of left no space, if you like, for just hiding away. So you can either, like there's a saying, isn't it? if you get life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So how do you use that? So Alex used his platform in the way that he has, and yeah, it's just like when something like this happens, it's like you want to run down the street screaming, "This can happen to you," you know, open your eyes. This is a reality. I have this thing where if you've got meningitis, if you've got a child and you say to a parent, okay, what are the signs of meningitis? They will say, get your glass out the cupboard, roll it over. If it doesn't go, take it to the doctor. Even now, I could say to anyone, what are the symptoms of COVID? And they could all reel them off. Ask them, what are the symptoms of someone who is potentially moving towards taking their own life? And none of them will, they're all behind this sort of thing, that is something that's not going to happen to us. And that for me was the thing that sparked not the knitting, but the sort of, I don't know, the need to go out there and say, look, come on, wake up everybody. If you don't see the symptoms, you're never going to be able to solve the problem. So in the same way as meningitis, so if you don't understand the rash is bad, you're not going to take them to the doctor. So the first thing we have to do is understand what are the symptoms, and they're not as straightforward as getting a glass out the cupboard. Then you have to decide how, if you know that there's a problem, you've seen the symptoms, how do you have that conversation? Oh my God, don't mention the word suicide. If I mention suicide, I'll give them an idea. I'll just waffle around the outsides of this because, and I'm sure they're all right really, because they would never do that. So how do you have that conversation? And then thirdly, you might have spotted the symptoms. You might have had that conversation, but where do you go for help? What do you practically and physically do? And bear in mind that Alex was campaigning for mental health way before any of this happened with Claire, and I'm his mum. Then you would have expected my knowledge to have been better than anyone else's, but it just wasn't. So it's just those three sort of areas, if you like. And going back to something we've talked about, Ben, which is, people coming along and asking about signs. Were there any signs? I don't know if you agree, but most of the people, the first thing they say to you is, can I ask you? Total strangers will say, were there any signs? Were there any signs? The first week after Claire passed away, I went for a walk at night just to try and stretch my brain. And one of my neighbours that I didn't know at all, came up to me and asked me, were there any signs? And that is due, I think, to a degree of them wanting comfort. If I say, no, there were no signs, that makes them feel that's okay then. I don't have to watch for these signs. I don't know, do you agree? Does that make any sense to you at all?
Yeah, it does. It's definitely something I've had to deal with. People that don't understand necessarily what suicide is and where it comes from want sort of an idea of why it's happened. And unfortunately, it's very rarely as simple as, oh, this happened and then it caused this. And it's quite difficult, isn't it? Because I don't know if you felt the same, but there's a certain degree of um, feeling like people want to simplify something that is really complex when they ask questions like that. And also, it can feel, and I'm not sure if you felt this way, but I certainly did. I felt like I'd I'd failed Sam
Yeah.
somehow. And I know now that I didn't, because that's just not how this works at all. But at the time, I felt like I'd missed signs. And the more I learnt
Absolutely.
about the signs that we need to look out for
Absolutely.
and all this, the more I reflected inwards and went, how did I not notice that? Or of course I noticed that sign, but I
Absolutely.
didn't say anything. And I don't know, did you feel the same when you were learning about like how important it is to ask those questions? And is there a part of you that felt quite guilty almost for not asking? That misplaced guilt, I might
Absolutely.
add, misplaced guilt. But did you feel that guilt?
Absolutely, 100%. It is. you carry a child for 9 months, you get them into this world, and you try to shepherd them in the right direction and do all of these things, and then something, bam, comes from completely left field, isn't it? Bam, and then what happened? I don't understand what happened. So there's a huge amount of guilt. I think it's very much I have a saying that suicide is a hindsight illness. So in hindsight, those pieces fall into place. While you're walking down that road at that moment in time, they're not there. They're not the rash on for meningitis. It's very, very much more subtle. Would you agree? And it's
Yeah.
only afterwards that you start putting things and learning about it and thinking, well, actually, yeah, maybe that does make sense.
I think it kind of depends on the situation, because I think we definitely had signs. So Jen had attempted suicide twice, exactly a year before, and
so
her
sorry
friend had died by suicide maybe 2 months before, and she'd been planning it for 6 weeks, and we knew she wasn't in a good place. But like for us, she was approaching 30. I know she was 30, and this was part of a cycle. And like, so I guess in a way there were signs, but like, and I had to go through quite a big realization in therapy. I think that basically my therapist was like, you couldn't have stopped her. And if I'd stopped her in that, or we'd stopped her in that week, you know,
it would have been the following week, or the week after,
or the year later, or you know, all of those things, because in the year before, she'd attempted on a Wednesday and then again on a Friday. So there was just like,
wow.
Yes, there were signs for us, absolutely solid signs, but God, and I can feel myself going, God, why didn't I do something more? But ultimately,
but that's the next thing, isn't it?
yeah.
What do you do?
Well, I think that's because the other thing is also, so Jen had been, I don't know what about how long Cleo had been like in any kind of mental health system. Jen had been in prison, and so she was being looked after by a probation officer. She had contact with her GP. She'd been sectioned before. You know, she'd gone through rehab, so she was in the systems. And one of the major things she said I haven't read her letters because none of them was addressed to me, and I've kind of avoided it, but she just said that she didn't want to be sectioned. She said that was the last thing that she'd wanted, and that she really didn't want to end up in a facility. And so in a way, you know, the only thing that probably we could have done at that stage was have her sectioned. And I mean, that wouldn't have been my decision. That would have been between my mum and my auntie, and you know, all the rest of it. But it really, I think it's also, I think where their signs is probably a question I'd put on a like, do not ask this list, because I think it does immediately give you a bit of guilt. Like, if there were signs, did I miss them? If there weren't signs, like, was I just not looking hard enough, or were there signs that I sort of ignored a little bit? Do you know, all of those things that then come up in your head if that question's been asked. And if someone said that to me, I'd probably at this stage be like, I'm not going to answer that question. And I understand it's not coming from a bad place. I just think it's a little bit insensitive.
It is, but I think it comes from a place of them, for them to be.
Of course.
I don't think they're being. It's for them to feel. So if I'd have said, yes, there was a rash, and you know, we didn't do anything with that rash, and they would say, okay, now suicide, we have a rash, therefore if I ever get a rash, I'll know what to do.
Yeah.
It's not as that is what I think that they're looking for. But also, bizarrely, there is a list of signs. I did a lot of research, like you say, Ben, you do, don't you? And there was a paper in America, and if you look at the Samaritans website, there's a list there as well, of signs. Now, one of the things that happened when for mental health took off was that an awful lot of people in the same club reached out to me, some of whom had lost their children as recently as 2 weeks previously. And it's sort of like you can talk to people in that club about these things. And when they started to tell me about what had happened, and I looked at this list, and I thought, this list is a very cold sort of, it says like feeling hopeless, or giving away things was one of them. And now on this hand, I've got people who've written to me and told me that their nephew had given away his guitars and somebody else had given away this. And it was all very plausible. You know, they were upgrading, they were going to get another guitar, but they wanted their friend to have this one. And suddenly this very bland list came to life. And it made me think we are just sort of like a little club, aren't we? And we find it difficult to verbalize and put colour on the list of signs for obvious reasons. But if we were able to do that, if there was a way, a safe place where all of us, we've got a lot of followers, and a large chunk of those have been impacted, and they came along. There were two girls that came and sat. We were in a pop-up shop in an agricultural show, and two young girls came along and sat on bales, and they just sat down and started knitting. And they were saying one of their best friends had taken their lives, and they were just chatting away there. And I was talking to them, and obviously they knew what had happened. And she said, we thought he was absolutely fine. He was really happy. You know, he'd been really, really worried about stuff. He'd got it all sorted. He was completely happy, and then he'd gone. And she said, but of course we know now that is normal. That is what happens in this situation, a period of anxiety followed by complete and I'm thinking, God, if everyone in the world out there, because we were sort of in that camp that there was worrying about this, worrying about that, and then suddenly, it'll be all right. What am I worrying about? You know, wouldn't the world be a better place if that became the rash with the glass? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's a hell of a thing to ask. It's a hell of a thing to ask if you've lost someone by suicide to add that kind of colour. But the stories I've got, which relate to the list, would help so many people who are not yet in this situation, but might be, or I don't know. What do you think?
I completely agree with you, Jane. I think it's so important that we share stories and lived experience. And lived experience is such an important part of how we're going to try and improve the response to suicides and mental health problems in this country is because it does normalize things, and it does create more relatable stories that can be used to help people understand how it can relate back to them. And I get that's why I think what you've been doing, what Dr. Alex has been doing, what Isabelle you've been doing with your show and what Suicide&Co do is so remarkable, because it does bring colour and life and relatability to these stories, and it does help. Also, you were saying there as well, like, being able to have conversations with other people that have lost people to suicide is so powerful, because I've certainly felt this. It feels like you already have a little bit of a barrier down when you talk to people that have also, it's a bit, peer support is really important. And I know when I've supported very sadly at the start of the year, a really close friend of mine lost her brother, and I was at their house, very very soon after that happened, supporting them through it, and there is something really powerful about, because I think when you lose someone to suicide, especially when you don't know anything about mental health and suicide, you can feel very very alone. In terms of, it can feel like you're the only person that's ever gone through that. you have a lot of questions that you don't really have anyone to ask that's going to help answer them. It was really nice to be able to offer that to my friend. And I remember one of the important points that we sort of talked about, and it was really weird for me actually, this experience, because I was there in that house. This had just happened to them, giving them advice and like talking to them about it. And it felt very strange because I didn't have that when I was going for it. I was sort of on my own working it out, and it was sort of a strange experience. But they, when I was talking to them, they were they found it very, very hard to understand. They hadn't gone through this education journey that we have. They found it very, very hard to understand how this person, that the son, brother, had died. And I just remember saying, with suicide, when we try and understand it, we really struggle because we're trying to rationalize an irrational way of thinking. And I
100%.
guess that's one of the benefits to this forced education journey that I've been on. And it sort of ties into your story there, Isabel. It's like people want to just put two and two together and get
Yeah.
four, but when it comes to suicide, actually it's irrational. The brain, when we look at neuroscience, and there's some great books that maybe I can link into the description of this episode if you're interested. Some great books that talk about the neurology and the neuroscience behind suicide. And when you read that and understand it, you realize that this is not a brain performing like a normal, healthy brain. It is fundamentally irrational. So, as a rational human being with a healthy brain, there is no physical way for us to understand what that person's going through or why that person did it, because we're trying to rationalize the irrational. And it's a really difficult concept to get your head around. But as soon as you can try and understand that, you can hopefully distance yourself a little bit from the guilt of not being able to spot signs, because we're trying to sort of put together a puzzle that's just a jumble of different puzzles all mixed together. It's just
Yeah,
impossible for a person
lots
to
of
understand.
pieces are not there, aren't they? You've got so many pieces missing that it just, it is like trying. It's like trying, as you say, tipping two or three jigsaw puzzles on the table and swiping half the pieces,
Yeah,
and then trying to make something out of that.
I think
exactly,
also,
exactly.
I think look, I have no idea what your own mental health journeys have been, but even though I've gone through some quite severe episodes of depression, like I've never been suicidal, and so for me, like finding my way towards that point just hit such a roadblock that I
Mm.
I can't find the path to it at all, and so to then
No.
be like, well, where? I guess it also for me gave me a really, and I knew she was much more, significantly more ill than me, but like just a bit more of a kind of awareness of like how deep her illness was to have got to that point, and to not just have
Yes.
got to the point, but to actually got to the point of thinking about it, planning and doing, and I
Mhm.
Yes.
think realizing that was quite a big reckoning as well.
Yeah. I agree, 100%.
Is there anything along this forced education journey that anyone's learned that's been really difficult? I'm assuming, Jane, did you have any understanding of mental health, suicide before you lost here and entered this world? Did you have any understanding, or have you very much been thrust into the same position as I was, where suddenly it was like, wow,
Yeah.
this thing's happened. What on earth is this?
Yeah. I know that there was someone at school with him a couple of years previously had taken his own life, and that basically was my only, it would sort of send shockwaves through all of the parents in the whole school. It would, wouldn't it? And up until that point, it hadn't even registered on anywhere. And even after that point, um, rather like the people that come up and ask you, were there any signs, or was there that there must be a reason, that there must be something, and you sort of rationalize it yourself. I don't need to worry about this because this isn't going to affect my family, very naively. But it's that kind of, because you don't want to think that it will. You know, you don't want to go there, do you? In your mind doesn't want to go there. And I think And certainly not for Claire. I wouldn't have said in a billion years that Claire would have done it, because he's or any of the boys, actually, I'm not saying that in that way, but Claire was popular, bright, he was, everyone went to him with their problems. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's very, what I have learned in this forced education journey is that there's a hell of a lot of information out there, and for the greater world. So Justin Trudeau came out with this quote, and I love it. And it is that never before has the pace of change ever been this fast, but never again will it ever be this slow. And I think for as a parent, if you think of my life journey, because I'm now 60, Alex has been telling people for donkey's years I've been 60, but I'm actually 60 now.
How rude.
which is great, because up until now they've been saying that I really look good for my age. Yeah, there's a reason for that. I'm only 50, but never mind. Never mind that. But when I was 15, we had a phone in the house. It took me to be 36 before I had a mobile phone. The mobile phone did nothing. It rang people, and you could take a picture of it, possibly. It took me to 40 to have a computer in the house. Do you know what I mean? And so if you look back at my mum's journey, then the previous journey, she never had a phone in her house, but she had a childhood which was equally technology free, if you like. So her experiences were very visible to her parents. I come along, and she is helping me based on her childhood. I'm helping my children based on my childhood. I didn't even know what social media was before Alex went into Love Island. I had no clue. So suddenly, here am I trying to take care of my children and being what I see as a good mum. But there's this whole other world out there that I have no idea about. I didn't know what Snapchat was. I had no idea what Instagram was. I had no idea about online bullying. You don't?
No, I know.
Well, I've got the answer. I've got the answer to that. So in my day, I was bullied in school. Mum and Dad went down to the school. They sat down with the teacher, sorted. These days, when I went home, I wasn't bullied. These days, it doesn't end at the school gate. You can bully people with various different apps and things. And I fundamentally don't think that parents know enough about the world in which our children are now living, because of that pace of change, has now become so fast that unless I get on that bus and understand everything about their world technology-wise, I am never going to be able to help them prepare for the challenges that come. And that I learned that very soon afterwards. And I have done some work around. So at one point I asked all of my followers to, if you've got a young person in your life, sit down and just tell me I just asked them, what is it like to be young? Not there's a lot of great things about being young. What are the pressures of being young? And the response I had was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. But the greatest thing to come out of it was the sheer shock from the parents about, the comments that were coming back. Everyone has an opinion on us. The pressure to succeed is crippling. All of these things. So, yeah, I must be honest, there's some wonderful places you can go to look for information which will tell you about their online presence and what the dangers are and all of that. So I think from that angle, I think that has got to be a good, to prepare your children for the world in which they live, not in the world that you lived. is a good thing.
Mm. It's so hard though, isn't it? Because it's quite a difficult thing to wrap your head around if you haven't grown up with it. People born today will never know a world without technology. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing. The fact that we're doing this from three different parts of the country is
Yeah.
is quite remarkable, right? You can meet people and be connected with people all over the world in quite positive ways. But obviously there's some real negatives to technology. And I think we do need to be more upfront about that and allow parents to understand it. Um, to bring us back to sort of like on your own journey then around that forced education, did you find yourself like researching things after it happened? Did you find yourself looking online and like Googling things and looking it up?
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, the biggest lesson that I had was actually going to see my GP, and that was, and he told me a story which I think very simply puts into perspective what Leah was going through, which is the two wolves story, and we make sure that we send that out with every item purchased. You get that, and that helped me no end to navigate my own emotions and but looking online, definitely that there was again on a study in America that was talking about the suitcase, and everyone carries a suitcase, and you have life's experiences, good and bad, go in that suitcase, and you have to try and keep that suitcase as light as you can. And for some people, they simply put every bad thing that's ever happened in their suitcase, and when something else bad happens, they add more things to the suitcase, and then they start opening the suitcase and looking for evidence that they're actually really rubbish at this, and that they're not pretty enough, and that their body image isn't right, and that nobody likes them. And then eventually that suitcase either becomes too heavy to lift, or they just can't be bothered anymore. And so you hear these things, and it helps. I'm a very visual. I'm not good on data. You can quote me. I'm not into stats and things. Powerful as they are, and they are unbelievably powerful. But for me, the story. So that sort of visual image of someone struggling to carry this suitcase was really powerful. And then you start to think, well, how could I have prepared, or how should someone prepare a person to be able to sort through that suitcase and keep throwing stuff out? There was we teach kids these days to succeed. I mean, that one line, isn't it? The pressure to succeed is crippling. Everyone has an opinion on us. That is just sums it up, I think, for young people. In my day, if you got a C, you did well. Well done, you passed. Amazing. Cool, you got a C. These days, a C. Well, who had the A? Who had the A's? All of this pressure that's there. We have to teach our kids to fail. We have to teach them to fail well. And funny job, I was listening on the radio yesterday, and one of the Olympians was on there, and she said in her whole career as an Olympian, she said she had only ever succeeded or learned. And I thought, God, what a great way to put it. So, I don't know, there's so much, you're constantly learning and just trying to verbalise and talk about it and be open.
Do you think then it was on the back of all of that research and that learning journey that you went on that you started Knit for Mental Health and wanted to sort of do more around sort of raising awareness and starting the charity?
No, that happened by accident.
Okay.
As these
Okay.
things do. Yeah, so one of my best friends said to me, Jane, you need something to take your mind off this. So either start doing jigsaws or go back to knitting. And I can't do jigsaws. I hate them. So I ordered some needles and wool, all of that online, and then I just started knitting. And what I found was that while you're physically making something, and it wasn't something new to me. I literally, my mum taught me when I was a child, so I was making the most difficult things I could just to make sure my mind was full. So I started giving them away. So basically, anyone, people had multiple things given to them. And then Claire's friend Owain, he wanted to raise some money in Claire's name. And Anthony said, well, why don't you start selling some and give him the money? So I started making wrist warmers and selling. And then this was about mid-November, and the orders came in thick and fast. So I had something like 120 pairs of the wrist warmers to make as Christmas presents. So people would reasonably expect to have them about 2 weeks before Christmas, not the night before. And there was only me. So I roped in all of my friends. I had friends who'd never knitted before, friends who'd only knitted very basically, and I was handing them this very complicated pattern. Make these. So Alex decided that he would help out. So he went onto his Instagram page and said, if there's anyone in and around Carmarthen and they can knit, can they please contact my mother and help her, because she needs help. By this point, we had closed the books for orders. It was all extremely pressured. That had the opposite effect, because now we had thousands of people wanting to buy them. But we did have a lot of people volunteer to help. So we managed to fill those orders and opened a Knit for Mental Health on the 3rd of February 2021. And that has been incredible. I have got to say that if that is an example of good social media, then that is it. We have over 300 people across the UK have donated and made items for us. We have an online shop. The guys in Yodimo, which is a really small website, they allowed us a platform. They helped us set up an online shop. We opened on the 3rd of February, as I said, and we had 400 orders on the first day. Of course, it was all in lockdown, wasn't it? So me and Anthony were there on our own trying to do these orders. And it's kind of moved on from there. We've donated to small mental health charities, at this point £70,000, which I know it doesn't sound like a huge amount of money.
Like a huge amount of money.
Yeah,
It doesn't
that's
sound like
massive.
a huge amount of money. It does when you think that the items we're selling are like £10.
I mean,
there's a huge amount of work
diminishing
gone
your
into
work
it.
there. £70,000 is a massive amount of money.
It's a lot of counselling sessions, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is a lot of counselling sessions. So that's how that happened, and it all overnight it just sort of became huge.
Amazing. It's so interesting talking to people that have gone through this, because almost everyone you meet that's gone through suicides managed to find some sort of positive silver lining. It's almost like this instinctive need, and if they haven't found it, there's like an inner need or want to find something that's positive out of it. And it's just it must be amazing. I'm sure it must be amazing to think about the impact that's had, and the number of these small charities and the impacts that they've had through your donations from Knit for Mental Health. Must feel it doesn't make the bad days any less bad, I'm sure, but it does make them potentially feel like they meant something. I know that's how I feel about my work and being able to help people. It doesn't make anything less bad. It just makes the bad days feel like they mean something. And it is interesting when you speak to people that they always have this sort of like instinctive need to try and find something good. And then the ripple effect of that is that it can help so many people, like I'm sure you have through knitting.
I think there is at the time, bear in mind we're still in COVID, people were in lockdown, there was a huge amount of anxiety around everything at that time. And we had a community. The patterns were created because of copyright. They were created by the people who made the things that we sell, and you know, they were part of something, and they are part of something. They're still part of something. I've made friends. I've got friends. I've got a lovely lady called Linda in Glasgow. I've never met her, but she's made a colossal amount of items for us. I speak to her on the phone, and it's just kind of created that network, that kind of feeling of the community. People get very excited if you sell a pair of gloves online for them, or a hat, or that they'll see their items in the shop, and then someone will buy them, and then you get an email saying, "Oh my God, I need to make some more. Someone's bought them."
That's amazing.
It is a really good, positive, feel good place, isn't it, for mental health?
Yeah.
It is.
Well, there we go. That's my
And it gives a
challenge then.
purpose.
I
You
did
got
say I
to.
need to knit. Maybe I'll have to try and knit something for the shop. Maybe that's
You need
my
to, Ben.
challenge. I've always wanted to. I'll have to give it a go. I don't know what your quality control's like though. It might not pass the it might
Okay.
not pass the bar.
There is someone for everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there is someone for everything.
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly.
I'll put it in the shop, Ben, and
Okay.
you can email me then and say, "My God, it sold. I need to send you something else."
If it sells, that'll be the day. I have a question actually, around something that I really struggle with, in this world, is that because it's become such a like big part of my day-to-day life, and this is sort of a question for both of you as well, because Isabel, when you're working on your show, this is so relevant. Um, it can be quite all-consuming working in this world, and I guess suddenly like constantly thinking about suicide and constantly thinking about mental health, and you don't have to work in it to sort of be thinking about this all the time. It can be quite exhausting, and there's a lot of time where I feel like I just want to sort of have a break from this for a moment and just do something happy and fun that's not to do with this awful thing. How do you feel when this is something that you're almost talking about day to day? Does it ever get tiring?
I think so, because I stopped doing ellipsis last July, and I think, and I've sort of had gaps where I've not been performing it, and I've been working on other things. But at the points when I have been like just doing that, and then like really trying to push the show, and then having to speak about the narrative behind the show and why, I found it exhausting. And I wouldn't be able to make. I mean, I have two careers, but I wouldn't be able to make it my career. I think it would. I'd find it um, a bit too close to home. I really admire you both for committing to it full time. And I really found like there was there was one week when I was performing ellipsis. I think it was in the winter, and um, I think there's also I'm literally monetizing it, and because at the same time you're thinking about like the pounds and pence of like how this is going to pay your rent, and then I really had to lean on my friends that week, and I had to be like, can anyone come and meet? Like, I can comp you into the show, but I'm just going to need you to sit in the dressing room with me afterwards, just because I can't go straight out into the. I think it's also because I was so public at that point about it, and I'd been on Woman's Hour. I found that like I had people I didn't know, but even more of them.
Everybody knows.
Yeah. And it was also, I think, because when I started doing it, because it was COVID, I was able to walk away from the theatre with a mask on, and I look a bit, take my hair down, put my mask on, and people just weren't sure if it was me.
Yeah.
Whereas as soon as it became 2022, 2023, you walk out the theatre and you look exactly the same, and people are like, oh, sorry, I just want to tell you. And I'd be like, I really needed my distance. So yeah, I found that quite hard, and I wouldn't be able to do it full time.
Well, I don't do this full time. I agree completely, Isabel, with what you just said. So I have long periods where I don't post on Instagram. I have long periods where I don't update the shop, and then I have frenetic periods where everything is full on. I'm really, really lucky. I've got a fantastic team of volunteers around me who basically drop everything and come. But I got to the point where I could not some days walk into this room because I'm looking at cards with Fleer on, and this is all the buttons that go on everything we sell is for Fleer, and I could not do it full time. So I have, we have where we live, which is wonderful. I also started to learn upholstery, and that is my unconnected get out. So, you know, it's so I do this. If I was describing it, I'd say I'm swimming from island to island, and I can swim to an island when I'm doing all of the work and everything that goes on with this, and you'll see on Instagram I'm posting every day, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and then I'll get to the island and I'll just lie on the island and I'll stay on that island for as long as I need to, until I feel I can get back in the sea and swim to the next island. And if as a result of that I lose all my followers or whatever, well, tough, that's it. I don't know, that's kind of how I think, but I agree with you 100%. It's that mask, isn't it? So we have similar, because I think because of Alex, everybody knows, but also when I go to a pop-up shop and I'm stood there, I am physically telling people I have lost my son to suicide. This is what we're doing to try and prevent anybody else, and I will sell my soul to that person as long as they buy something. Do you know what I mean? I know that sounds mercenary, but if I don't do that, if I don't put it out there, because what then happens is that person will say, do you know, my next door neighbour's son did the same thing, or I've had people crying, I've had people telling me that they're worried about their children at the moment, and really opening up about their own mental health and things like that. But that takes it right out of you, and that's the swimming. And then I get to the island, lie on the beach, and I might lie on that beach for 3 or 4 months before I decide that I can get back in the water and swim to the next island.
It's a really good lesson there, I think, that we can take from that, which is, I think it's really important that we have boundaries with ourselves about where our limit is with stuff like this, and whether it's you're doing this as a job or starting an organization, or you're just researching this topic. Sometimes you just need a break, and I think it's really important to check in and understand what those boundaries are. Like we're talking about that forced education journey around suicide and mental health. If you're researching stuff and it's not making you feel good, and it's sort of bringing you down a rabbit hole, then it is worth just sort of checking in and understanding how it's making you feel, and what boundaries you might need to put in place with yourself and your own like, desire to get information, because
How
it
do you
can feel.
manage them, Ben?
How
How
do
do
I
you cope?
manage?
Yeah,
It's
because
a
you're doing this. Yeah, but because you're
pretty
doing it,
good
you know,
question.
this is like, you know, I'm not doing this full time. And Isabelle,
Yeah.
you've explained why you're not doing it. How do you cope doing it full time? Because it can take your life over.
Oh yeah, it does. I mean, it's really difficult, and I'll be honest, I absolutely love it. Like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this because I get to meet people like you two, and charities like Suicide&Co. And this world is, I mean, you called it a club earlier, Jane. It's a really lovely club to be in. I mean, it's an awful reason for being in the club, but it's just so lovely because
Full of
people in
lovely
this are just,
people.
it's full of lovely people and interesting people. So I absolutely love it. I think I go through waves where I just want to escape it and do something different. Particularly when bad stuff happens and you get too emotionally involved. I'm much better now than I was at sort of understanding when I need to just do admin, and not do like big ideas about stuff and get too involved personally. I went through counselling for this reason, um, and actually, but it's the, I live in a conflict because on one hand, I find it difficult, this topic. I find it frustrating. There's a lot of very sad, traumatic stories. But on the other hand, I feel like it's really creating an impact, and there's something so special about being able to have these conversations that Sam was so embarrassed and ashamed of having. And it just, if I have a day
Mm.
where I'm talking about these things, or if I have a podcast, or I go and do a speech in Parliament, or go and deliver a talk, or go and do something where we've really connected and had and faced this issue head on, I will go back and I will almost always have a smile on my face and feel really good about it. Because it just feels just so amazing to be able to do it. However, sometimes it doesn't. And you mentioned that people coming up to you and sort of wanting to talk about their own stories, and that happens a huge amount. And I've had to really work to get boundaries in terms of how I take that on and when I can say no to that, because that I found really, really, really tough.
Mm.
And also I went out of my way to get training, so I understood what I can fall back on. So I'm a volunteer for a crisis service. I sort of have that background knowledge now. So if I'm in a situation where, and this happens quite a lot, where someone's like, this is happening to me, I don't know what to do, at least I have that boundary I can fall back on and go, I know what I'm doing here. I know exactly what to say. I'm going to get that on signposting somewhere, and sort of leave it there. So I'm not gonna. I don't have it all sorted. I don't really know if I look after myself enough, but it's I'm doing it a lot better than I used to, and it's sort of a journey and learning process. Which is why I pulled that out and said, and just noticed that when you were both talking, like, having boundaries in this is so important, because what we're talking about is a really traumatic, deep part of ourselves, and accessing it all the time is just not sustainable. And it takes a lot of time to understand how that's affecting you. Because everyone says, when you're going through grief, you've got to find coping mechanisms, you've got to find ways of like dealing with it. I had that a lot when Sam died. Everyone was just like, make sure you're dealing with it, make sure you're dealing with it.
Yeah, but
I've
what's that
found,
mean? What's that
yeah,
mean?
make sure you're dealing with it. And I'm like, okay. And then I was speaking to someone the other day about this, and they were just like, everyone really demonizes distractions, like it's sort of, you're not dealing with it. But this person was just
It's
like,
good.
that's one of the most important things you can do, is give your brain a break from it all. If you're
Mm.
Yeah.
struggling with this whole world that you've now entered in, there is absolutely nothing wrong with picking up a couple of knitting needles and just putting
Or
on
doing
some
a
music,
jigsaw.
or doing a jigsaw, or going and seeing friends, or going, having a laugh with someone, finding a distraction. As long as you're keeping tabs on yourself and making sure you're not doing those things because you don't want to face what's going on, there's nothing wrong with distractions. So that was a really long answer, a long way of saying I don't really know. And I try and like keep tabs and make sure I understand my own boundaries. Um, but I do that in a way that also allows me to do something that I love. And I've just sort of accepted that if I want to do this work that I absolutely adore, like, it is going to be slightly taxing, and I'm going to be a little bit more vulnerable, and I'm going to need to change how I react to and interact with my friends and my family, and make sure I'm leaning on them for support. And like, I'm very comfortable now with crying on people, and then they
Yeah.
are, the people in my life are really amazing at sort of just being a shoulder to cry on now. And so they understand that it's like an emotional toll that this has on me. So yeah, it's sort of just, it's been a learning process. But I guess that's all any of this is. No one tells you what to do. You have to go out and find it and understand it yourself. Which is sort of why we want to do this podcast, because there's not really enough of a sort of friendly hand to grab when you're going through all of this that can sort of just normalize it.
No, no. But I will say, organisations like Suicide&Co, To Wish Upon a Star, which was the one that was operating in Wales when we were affected, I think just being aware and knowing that there are people out there, it's incredibly isolating. We were lucky, we were introduced to Wish Upon a Star from day one. But knowing that there is help out there is, it's a terrible situation, but you're not on your own, and that means a huge amount.
Exactly. And as we move to wrap up, what has been a really lovely conversation. I've really enjoyed this. Um, where would be where would be the best place that you found sort of information that was helpful along that sort of learning journey? You mentioned a charity there that I'm sure supported you in similar way to how Suicide&Co is there for people that have lost loved ones to suicide. Where would you say is a place that you found most helpful when you were going through it?
I think getting a good counsellor and really being able to open your heart to them is huge. Not everyone can afford counselling, so organisations like Suicide&Co, To Wish Upon a Star. Don't forget that the Samaritans don't want to speak to people who are imminently about to take their own life. They want to talk to people who are just having a bad time. So pick up the phone to them. There is help out there. I will caveat this as well, if I can, which is slightly doesn't come into your question though, Ben, which is if I was saying about help out there in terms of prevention or in terms of being a parent and being concerned, I would definitely find somewhere. There's a charity called the Charlie Waller Trust that will do mental health first aid courses, so they will help you to understand what those signs are, how to have that conversation. I know this is not answering your question, but this is to me equally as important. They'll help you to understand the signs, how to tell you how to have a conversation, and they will help you with where to go for help. There are umpteen charities out there. I mean, I did it with the Calzi Foundation. If you've got a young person in your life, then you have to do that, and you need to get your head into the internet. Look at places like where hub.gov.uk.wales, which is HWB, Internet Matters, JAAQ, which is another fantastic website that allows you to talk about all different sorts of mental health issues. And remember that you also have mental health and you don't have all the answers. So I know that didn't quite answer. I know I went off on a bit of a tangent.
It was perfect. It was perfect and so helpful. And I guess from my point of view as well, like that training and broadening your mind, it can be a difficult path to go down. It's quite difficult to understand a lot of these things. A lot of them are put to you in black and white as if it's easy to understand when actually it's not. And I guess reflecting on what we've said, like suicide is irrational. It's very, 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 very hard to understand by its very nature. So just look out for yourself, I guess, when you're going down that education pathway. And you mentioned there, Jane, having the assistance of a counsellor and a professional, and this is so important. And obviously, that's the bread and butter of what Suicide&Co does, is put people in touch with and together with their counsellors. Because actually, if you're going on this and you're starting to have questions about whether you missed any signs, or which are all natural questions to be asking, if you're
going to do that 100%.
If you're finding yourself on that journey and struggling with that education journey, then being able to bring that to a counselling session and just say to them, look, this is what I'm really struggling to understand. These are the professionals, these are the people that are going to be able to walk you through that, how you're feeling in that moment and why you have that desire for information as well. But it can also be a really amazing way of getting some sort of closure about having that understanding. It can be a really nice way of being able to sort of fold over that chapter and feel a little bit more at ease and at peace with what happened. Isabelle, what just fine, like to wrap up, I guess, what would be your advice to someone that is maybe confused about what's happened and doesn't really have any understanding of suicide or mental illness, and sort of wants to understand?
I mean, the thing is, I agree with so much of this, of like research and finding organizations, and absolutely go to therapy. But I think like I feel like I got quite stuck for probably 3 years, like in this system of going like, right, I'm writing this show about it, like I'm really feeling like I wasn't living, and I feel like I lost because at the end of those 3 years, we suddenly went into COVID, and I feel like I essentially spent 5 years of my life not really living. And so allow yourself some time to look at those stats, allow yourself some time to look at, like, you know, what your next 6 months, year, 2 years looks like in terms of a journey without your person. But also just remember that you're alive, and just find ways of feeling like you're in your body, like up and about, like go swimming, go for walks, go really make sure that you're, I feel like so much of this mental health journey is really cerebral. And so you spend time like on the internet looking for stuff and facts and figures and organizations and things to do that are really practical. And I just really think, like, get up, get yourself up, pull your shoulders back, like put your face out into the sun.
That is so true.
You know?
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Isabelle, that is perfect end to that conversation. It's so true.
Mic drop moment.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jane, for joining us. Really, really appreciate your time. And I just want to say thank you and congratulations on everything you've done and all the work you continue to do. And I will be in touch with my submission.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. We do provide help and advice as well.
Okay.
We'll pick you an easy
I'm
pattern.
really looking forward to it, Ben.
I feel like I've just dug myself a bit of a hole here, but anyway, we'll see what happens. Thank you, Jane. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for allowing me the time to speak and for listening. Very appreciated.
Our absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. Conversations and Company would like to thank Acast, our wonderful guests, and all of you listeners. Thank you for your generous support. Please rate, review and subscribe, or send a link to someone who might need it. Remember, you can go to our website to check out the various support services available through Suicide&Co. We'll be back with another episode soon.